What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of the JT Sports Podcast. I'm your host. Glad that you guys are tuned in with me wherever you're watching. We're live on YouTube. We also are live on X. And this is going to be a really great show today, man. I got some thoughts on the Madden 25 quarterback rankings. Can you believe they have Tua Tagovailoa, Tua turning the ball over, rated higher than CJ Stroud? Oh my goodness, the travesty. Like, who's ever in charge of making these Madden 25 ratings, they need to go ahead and fire them and let me do them, because I could do a much better job than what the folks at EA do when it comes to making these ratings. And there's some more disrespectful ratings that we got to discuss. Trevor Lawrence, he signed his big-time mega deal with the Jacksonville Jaguars. It was heavily controversial. He now is tied for Joe Burrow as the highest-paid quarterback in the league. You know, I got to give my thoughts on that. The Minnesota Vikings had some really strange and confusing comments about Sam Darnold that they made a couple of days ago. I'm going to be giving you guys my stat predictions for all of the rookie quarterbacks going into the 2024 NFL season. Alabama ceiling, year one under Kalen DeBoer. Could they win a national championship this year? The Houston Texans, most people believe this team is going to be a lock to win the AFC South, but I don't know about that. Deion Sanders, there's a lot of speculation surrounding his future after this year at Colorado. Is he going to stay? Is he going to leave? Some people believe he could be coaching the Dallas Cowboys in 2025. And I got my preseason 2024 SEC power rankings. Before we dive into it and all, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Make sure that you follow us on X at JT Sports __, on Instagram at JT Sports _. And before we begin, here's a quick word from our partner, Mint Mobile. Does it piss you off how much you pay for your monthly phone bill? Why are you getting frustrated when our partner Mint Mobile has plans as low as $15 a month that give you unlimited talk and text on the nation's largest 5G network? Stop getting frustrated with how much you spend on your monthly phone bill and go to trymintmobile.com/JT Sports in description and pinned comment down below to get access to premium wireless for only $15 a month. That's only $15 a month. Switching to Mint is easy. It only takes 15 minutes to do. If you're pissed off with how much you pay for your monthly phone bill, switch to Mint Mobile today and go to trymintmobile.com/JT Sports in description and pin comment down below to get premium wireless for only $15 a month. Stop getting upset with how much you spend on your monthly phone bill and switch to Mint Mobile today. The Madden 25 quarterback rankings have been officially released, and surprise, surprise, they're as bad as usual. The first biggest gripe that I have with these ratings is that Tua Tagovailoa is one of the highest rated quarterbacks in this year's game. And do you know who he's rated higher than? CJ Stroud. Tua has an overall of 88. Meanwhile, CJ Stroud is the 14th rated quarterback at 81. And they got Tua rated higher than guys like Matthew Stafford, Jared Goff, Aaron Rodgers, Brock Purdy. Like, are you kidding me right now? What has Tua accomplished in his career to deserve getting this much praise? This is insanity. This dude didn't even show up in the wild card round against the Kansas City Chiefs. For CJ Stroud to have the greatest rookie season in NFL history and him only be rated at 81 below Tua makes no sense to me. If you were to ask Mike McDaniel right now, who would he rather have as his starting quarterback? I'm pretty confident we all know who the answer would be, and that will be without a doubt CJ Stroud. And then how about Baker Mayfield being rated higher than Trevor Lawrence, Derek Carr? I don't know about that. I think that Baker Mayfield, Derek Carr are pretty much on the same tier when it comes to the quarterback tiers and hierarchy. I don't really believe that Baker Mayfield should be rated higher than Derek Carr. Derek Carr only gets a 75 overall. I gotta disagree with that one. One rating that I do disagree with, one that I do agree with, is Justin Fields being rated one overall higher than Russell Wilson at a 76. Uncle Russ comes in at 75. That's probably the only rating I agree with. They got my guy, Bryce Young, as the 28th rated quarterback in the game at a 72 overall. He's behind backups as like Sam Howell, Gardner Minshew, Andy Dalton, who he has the same rating as. Bryce Young got a 72 overall. They could have gave my dude a little bit more respect than that. They could have at least gave him a 73 or a 74. You got Anthony Richardson at a 74. Deshaun Watson, I guess they don't believe in Deshaun at all. I guess they're out on the Deshaun Watson hype train because he's at a 74 also. These ratings are god-awful, man, and this isn't even the worst of them. The worst rating that I probably saw was Jared Goff, rated at an 82. Jared Goff has had 2 outstanding seasons where he's played some of his best, most efficient football as his career, or in his career, and yet they only have him rated at an 82. And they got Jordan Love slightly below him at an 81 overall. What is going on with EA Sports and these damn Madden 25 ratings? Can they just go ahead, fire the ratings guy, and just hire me to do it? Because I could come out with some much better ratings than these. At least they had enough respect for Brock Purdy. Brock Purdy comes in as the 9th highest rated quarterback in the game. I don't know if I would have Tua over Brock Purdy, though. I believe personally that Brock Purdy is a top 6, top 7 quarterback in the game. The disrespect and the Brock Purdy hate train is never going to go away unless he finds a way to win the Super Bowl. And even if he's able to do that, there's still going to be a good amount of people out there who still don't think Brock Purdy is that good. So these are just my quick thoughts on the Madden 25 quarterback rankings. These are awful. They aren't good at all. Tua, for him to get this much props for not winning a playoff game, not showing up against good teams, makes no sense to me, man. Dak Prescott is at a 90. Josh Allen, Joe Burrow come in at 92, 93. And Lamar Jackson is the second highest rated QB in the game at a 98 behind Patrick Mahomes, who comes in at the all-world 99 overall. So let me know how you guys are feeling about these Madden 25 ratings down in the comment section down below. Shout out to my guy Mace Taggart with the $10 donation. He asked, family, are you pulling up NBA draft night, JT? I can't pull up, man. I don't know anything about the NBA draft. The only dudes I know about are Zach Edey and my dude Terrence Shannon, who just got found innocent of those false accusations. Those are the only 2 dudes I know about. So if I was on there, I wouldn't know any of the guys on there. I wouldn't be able to give any good analysis for you. But I appreciate you giving the $10 donation, and I appreciate all the love, my dude. Shout out to everybody in the chat. If you didn't know, we are now live on X. So if you can't find us on YouTube, you can listen to us on X. Go ahead and follow us there at JT Sports__. Also, make sure to follow us on Instagram at JT Sports_. And if you're listening live, make sure to go ahead, listen to the JT Sports Podcast. You can find this episode after it concludes in audio format on Apple, Spotify, Amazon, wherever you get your podcast from. The JT Sports Podcast is available. Now it's time to really get into tonight's show. All right. Trevor Lawrence got paid. He is now tied with Joe Burrow as the highest paid quarterback in the National Football League. He's going to be making $55 million a year. Him and the Jaguars have come to an agreement on a 5-year, $275 million extension with $142 million fully guaranteed. Jacksonville made the right decision, and the salary shouldn't really be that big of an issue. I get it. Trevor Lawrence, in a lot of people's eyes, is viewed as the most overrated quarterback in the NFL. But if you think about what he means to the city of Jacksonville, he's a blessing to Duval. Before Trevor Lawrence arrived in Duval, Jacksonville didn't get any national attention at all. They weren't playing in any primetime games, and you barely could have fans filling out the whole entire stadium. Ever since T-Law has become QB1 for the Jaguars, people now pay more attention to this franchise than what they've ever had since it first came into existence nearly 2-3 decades ago. And when you have somebody as good as Trevor Lawrence, who is by far the most talented quarterback that Jacksonville has ever had, you have to pay the dude what he's asking for. You aren't going to play hardball with the best quarterback in your franchise history, unless you want to go back to the dark days before sunshine arrived, of Blaine Gabbert, Blake Bortles, Chad Henne. Do y'all remember those days in Jacksonville when Jacksonville had god-awful quarterback play? Even if Trevor Lawrence is no more than the top 15, top 12 quarterback throughout the duration of his career in Jacksonville, he still by far is going to give them better quarterback play than what they've ever had. Jacksonville is not a big market franchise that can attract big names in free agency. And they also have missed on a lot of quarterbacks in the draft. Blaine Gabbert, Chad Henne was somebody who they picked up who was a failure with the Miami Dolphins. Blake Bortles was a whiff. Although he led Jacksonville to an AFC championship, he was the reason why that great defense broke up, because everybody knew that Blake Bortles never should have gotten paid. Trevor Lawrence is going to give Jacksonville stable, consistent quarterback play for the next decade. He is going to be able to bounce back from the down season that he had last year. We seem to forget that before Trevor Lawrence got banged up the second half of 2023, Jacksonville was in first place in the AFC with the best record in the conference at 8-1. And then after they played the 49ers, that's when things went left. But when Trevor Lawrence has been fully healthy, he's been one of the better quarterbacks in the NFL. Has he lived up to the generational billing that draft analysts put on him when he came out of Clemson? Absolutely not. But there still is a lot of room for Trevor Lawrence to grow. Who cares about the turnovers that he had in the Jaguars playoff win against the Los Angeles Chargers? You want to know another quarterback who a lot of people dick around, who had a lot of turnovers throughout his career? Andrew Luck. But I never heard people calling Andrew Luck overrated, bashing Andrew Luck for his turnover issues. And the disrespect for Trevor Lawrence is so insane that you have fools that have enough audacity to compare him and Daniel Jones. Daniel Jones and Trevor Lawrence, who cares what the stats say? This eye test will show you that Trevor Lawrence is by far a way more superior quarterback than what Danny Dimes is. If the Giants had Trevor Lawrence going into this season instead of Danny Pennies, Brian Daboll probably wouldn't be on the hot seat and probably wouldn't be coaching for his job. Is this a little bit of an overpay? Hell yeah, it is. Not even a little bit of an overpay. It is a massive overpay. But this is the way these quarterback contracts are starting to come out. Every time you have somebody who's at least viewed in a top 15 regard, they're going to end up exceeding the previous guy who got paid a lot of money. You know who's going to be next in line to get overpaid? It's going to be Tua Tagovailoa. But you want to know the good thing about this? 3-4 years down the line, we're going to look at this Trevor Lawrence contract and we're going to say, damn, he's making $55 million a year, but guys like CJ Stroud and Caleb Williams potentially could be making 70, damn near 80 million a season. Jacksonville got ahead of the curve. They know Trevor Lawrence is the dude. The only people that I see saying that Trevor Lawrence isn't it, Jacksonville made a decision, are non-Jaguar fans. I'm not a Jaguars fan. I just have happened to live in this city for the majority of my life. So I've seen the travesty that Jacksonville has put out at quarterback year after year prior to Trevor Lawrence's arrival. Before he got to Jacksonville, it was dark. And then he came in, and all of a sudden, the sun started to rise. Jacksonville now is playing on Sunday Night Football, Monday Night Football. I can never remember in all my years watching Jaguars football, Jacksonville ever playing in primetime games at night. The biggest games that I remember Jacksonville playing in were at the 4:25 time slot. Even that year when they went to the AFC Championship in 2017, they still didn't get a love from a lot of people in the national media, and they didn't really play in a lot of big games prime time that year neither until the playoffs rolled around. The best Jacksonville was getting was those middle of the afternoon Sunday slots. What Trevor Lawrence has meant to this city has been drastically understated by the people who aren't fans of this team. This is Jacksonville's quarterback. Not for the next 2 or 3 years, for the next decade. Is this going to be a decision that Jacksonville looks back upon in 2-3 years, like how the New York Giants do with Daniel Jones, to say, man, we really effed up giving this dude all this money? Absolutely not. Trevor Lawrence, in the few seasons that he's been in Jacksonville, has led this franchise to more success than what they've had over the last decade or so. In 2017, if you want to count that season where the Jaguars got robbed in the conference championship game, that was a one-off year. Because what happened after that? They went back to irrelevancy. Trevor Lawrence, his last 2 years, has led Jacksonville to an AFC South title, a playoff win, something that Tua doesn't have, nor Justin Herbert, but so many people have a lot of praise for those guys. But yet I heard LaShawn McCoy try to say, you know how many other quarterbacks have a playoff win? Yeah, there are some average, barely below average quarterbacks that have won in the postseason in the past, but you still can't take that away from Trevor Lawrence, considering the lack of postseason success that Jacksonville has had in the history of their franchise existence. Trevor Lawrence is going to be great for Jacksonville this season. He's going to have a bounce back year. It's so easy to judge somebody by the stats versus judging somebody via the eye test. Numbers lie. You keep trying to pitch me that the stats never lie. Yes, they do. There are a lot of quarterbacks who put up good numbers. I remember Blake Bortles had a season early into his career when he had 40 damn touchdowns, and most of them came in the fourth quarter because Jacksonville was getting blown the hell out by multiple possessions, and they had no choice but to throw the football, and the defenses were playing prevent because they weren't trying to give up a lot of big plays, so Blake Bortles could just dink and dunk downfield. So don't try to pitch me the whole argument that numbers don't lie, because they definitely do. And anybody that has a functioning brain that watches these games would tell you that Trevor Lawrence is not in the same class as Daniel Jones. You can call him overrated all you want to, but don't you dare disrespect him by trying to compare him as one of the NFL's worst quarterbacks in the league. This was a good move by the Jacksonville Jaguars, getting ahead and locking Trevor Lawrence up long term, because I'm pretty confident he's going to ball out this season. The worst you're going to get out of Trevor Lawrence is top 15 quarterback play. But the ceiling is Trevor Lawrence potentially playing at an MVP caliber level. I don't have any problem with the Jaguars' decision to extend Trevor Lawrence to the amount that they agreed to give him. $142 million fully guaranteed isn't that bad. We're looking at the annual salary at $55 million as the big detractor of this contract. But the guaranteed money, to me, really is what matters the most. There's no guarantee that he's always going to see every penny of that $55 million every year. You don't know if there's incentives put into this contract, stipulations put into this thing. But when Trevor Lawrence is healthy, he's putting fans in the seats, getting Jacksonville in primetime games, And they've had back-to-back winning seasons with him underneath center for this organization. Shout out to everybody in the chat. My guy Don C says, at JT, what about the North being on Hard Knocks? I know the Ravens and Steelers franchise hate it. Well, Tomlin and Harbs anyway. Listen, I watched that quarterback Netflix docuseries last year, and Patrick Mahomes won a Super Bowl being featured on it. So I don't want to hear anything about Hard Knocks being a distraction when Patrick Mahomes took Kansas City to a Super Bowl being on that Netflix docuseries. So all those excuses go out the drain when it comes to Hard Knocks being a distraction and this and that. If you're a good coach and you know how to win games, you don't care about the lights and the lights and all the glamour that comes from being on Hard Knocks. And Hard Knocks isn't even as big now as what it used to be back in the early 2010s. I remember when Hard Knocks had Rex Ryan on that thing. You talk about must-watch TV, go back and watch those old school Hard Knocks, the ones that had the Baltimore Ravens on there. Hard Knocks has become way more watered down than what it used to be back in the day. Because Hard Knocks used to have a lot of swearing, a lot of profanity. I don't see half the stuff on Hard Knocks now that used to be in that thing when I was watching it as a youngin'. But shout out to everybody in the chat. Shout out my guy Mace Taggart. Shout out my guy Warren Gotti talking sports, man. I want to segue to this. The Minnesota Vikings a few days ago made a shocking and very confusing comment about Sam Darnold. They believe Sam Darnold has untapped potential. Tell me where we've heard this before. Because I recall when he got signed by the 49ers last year, watch out. Kyle Shanahan may be able to squeeze some juice out of Sam Darnold. He was put in a bad situation playing on the Carolina Panthers, had to play under Adam Gates with the New York Jets. Sam Darnold is one of those quarterbacks that shows you enough that anytime he gets signed to a halfway decent situation, people still think he can play at the level that was expected out of him when he was a first-round pick years ago. I don't see that being the case in Minnesota. Could he come in and be a decent quarterback for them? Hell yeah. Kevin O'Connell was able to win with Josh Dobbs, Nick Mullins last season. You mean to tell me he can't be able to win a few games with Sam Darnold throwing the Jay Jettas, Jordan Addison, TJ Hawkinson with a really good offensive line? The thing with Sam Darnold is that the reason why Sam Darnold's career has panned out the way that it has isn't necessarily always due to him being in bad situations. He wasn't able to beat out Brock Purdy for the starting job last year. And you can say that it never was a legit quarterback competition anyway because they knew Brock Purdy was going to be the guy. But I didn't see anything out of Sam Darnold in the preseason last year to show me, oh yeah, like imagine this dude playing on the Vikings or a better situation or a team that actually gave him a shot. He could actually be a great starter. Sam Darnold at his best is a bridge stopgap quarterback. You know, if your starter gets injured and he's out for the season, he can come in and win you a few games, but he's not going to be somebody who you can make it to the playoffs with. He's not going to be somebody who you decide to build your franchise around for the next 5 to 6 years. Baker Mayfield and Geno Smith the last couple of years have had outlier seasons to me. Look at Geno Smith last year. After he had that big breakout campaign in 2022, look at how he played in 2023. The level of play went down dramatically. Baker Mayfield, his level of play is about to go down dramatically with them losing Dave Canales to the Carolina Panthers. And you know who was there the year Geno Smith had that insanity run when everybody wrote him off and he didn't write back? Dave Canales. I get that there's still the Sam Darnold fan club out there that believes that he hasn't been put in a situation as good as this one. But let's not make it seem as if Sam Darnold hasn't kind of been part of the problem for the situations that he's been put in. New York definitely was an awful situation. In Carolina, it wasn't that great neither. But Steve Wilkes was able to win games with Sam Darnold. And that's the thing with Sam Darnold. You can win some games with him. You're not going to win a Super Bowl with him. We got to stop trying to be attached to quarterbacks that don't have the ceiling to win you a Lombardi trophy. That's the biggest problem that the NFL has right now. We want to pay dudes like Daniel Jones and Tua Tagovailoa, who we know aren't going to show up come postseason time, all this big time money, and then we wonder why these teams can't win. If your quarterback can't win you a Super Bowl, you shouldn't be looking at them as the long-term answer. You should be looking to replace them at the best moment you get the chance to. J.J. McCarthy, what do these comments about Sam Darnold and this untapped potential say about him? Was he stinking up the joint in OTAs and minicamp? I was doing some fishing around, and I actually talked to a few Vikings fans before I went on live, and they said that J.J. McCarthy actually looked pretty decent at OTAs and minicamp. These comments don't have any bearings on J.J. McCarthy starting for Minnesota potentially this year. Is he going to start week 1? Maybe not. But I expect to see J.J. McCarthy at some point this season. You got to be fooling yourself if you think that Sam Darnold in the NFC North, with the Detroit Lions and the Green Bay Packers being perennial Super Bowl contenders, Minnesota's going to be able to have a winning season with him at quarterback. You can say this is the best situation that he's ever had, but we said the same thing when he was playing for the 49ers last year. And Brock Purdy is supposed to be this game manager, barely above average quarterback that only benefits from having a lead play calling and a good supporting cast, but yet Sam Darnold couldn't debunk him from the ranks of QB1, and he's a former first-round pick. I'll never forget watching Sam Darnold's pro day and hearing all the oohs and ahs for all the throws he was making, but none of that has translated in the NFL. Sam Darnold will give you a few moments, have a few games that'll make you go, wow, I definitely see why he was drafted in the first round a few years ago. But the most of his games are going to show you why he's viewed the way he is right now. No more than a low-end starter that's just a stopgap until the dude behind them is ready to go, or you can find a better suitable replacement. I'm not putting anything into these comments that Minnesota made. This is just off-season hoopla. You know, everybody in the off-season is overly optimistic. You will never hear a head coach down talk any player of their team during this part of the offseason. OTAs, everybody looks like the next Brady. Everybody looks like the next superstar. Everybody looks like they can have a breakout season. But once September rolls around, we find out the truth about a lot of these dudes. Sam Darnold isn't it. No matter how good of a play caller and the situation that he's in with the Minnesota Vikings under Kevin O'Connell, his ceiling is severely limited. We've seen enough out of Sam Darnold to know what he is at this point. I don't see no untapped potential in Sam Darnold. Could he pull off a Case Keenum? Maybe. But I'm willing to bet a lot of money that that doesn't happen. People tried to say the same thing a few years ago to me after the Steelers signed Mitchell Trubisky and then drafted Kenny Pickett. There's a reason why J.J. McCarthy got drafted by Minnesota. They already had Sam Darnold on the roster before they took J.J. McCarthy. So that shows you that if there truly was some untapped potential, if they really believed in him, like how some people are suggesting they do by these comments, they just would have passed up on J.J. McCarthy and they would have got a skill position player or offensive lineman or another pass rusher or cornerback that could better help them win this season. Instead, they drafted J.J. McCarthy. There's nothing to put stock into when it comes to Sam Darnold and this untapped potential nonsense that the Vikings are trying to sell us, man. This is just off-season hoopla that I call it. Shout out to everybody in the chat, man. We got 18 live viewers right now. We are live on YouTube. We are live on X. Make sure you like, share the live stream wherever you're watching. If you're watching on YouTube, Subscribe to the channel, turn on post notifications so you don't miss when we go live and when we drop new content. If you're listening on X, give us a follow, retweet the live stream. Happy that everybody's tuned in tonight, man. A few nights ago, I had to buy the blue check mark because they wouldn't let me live stream without it. So Elon Musk got me. So I just said, you know what? I'm paying $11 for this thing. I might as well go ahead and capitalize off it and just go ahead and start live streaming on this also. So this is the reason why I'm live streaming on both platforms now. Because, you know, I accidentally bought the blue check mark. Don't ask me how I accidentally did it, but we here now. We live on X. We live on YouTube. I'm glad that everybody's here to join me. Listen to the podcast on Apple, Spotify, Amazon, wherever you get your podcast from. Once this episode concludes, you can find it in audio format on all podcasting platforms. And follow us on Instagram at JTSports_ and on X at JTSports__. The 2024 NFL rookie quarterback class has been one of the most hyped up classes that we've seen in recent memory. And I want to give my stat predictions for the top 6 rookie QBs that are expected to get some significant playing time this year. We're going to start off with Bo Nix. He got drafted in the first round by the Denver Broncos. People don't expect Bo Nix to be that good. I feel a lot differently than most. He's going to Sean Payton, the quarterback whisperer. People seem to forget Sean Payton's resume. He fixed up Russell Wilson coming off the worst season of his career under Nathaniel Hackett. And then he also was able to have Jameis Winston playing efficient turnover-free football his final year in New Orleans. People seem to forget in 2021, Jameis Winston had the Saints on top of the NFC South before Brady retired with the 5-1 record before he got injured against the Bucs. And that's when the Saints season went left. And despite that, they still finished with the 9-8 record, and they barely missed out on making it into the playoffs that year, having to play Taysom Hill and Trevor Siemian at QB. Sean Payton also won in 2019 with Teddy Bridgewater when Drew Brees got injured. He went 5-0 with Teddy Bridgewater, who was a few years removed from suffering that devastating leg injury that he had in Minnesota, where many of us questioned if he ever was going to play a snap of football again. And then after Teddy Bridgewater balled out under Sean Payton, he got a big bag by Carolina following the season's conclusion. Sean Payton, if he can win with Teddy Bridgewater, Taysom Hill, and he can have Jameis Winston playing high-level efficient football, you mean to tell me that he can't win with Bo Nix? Bo Nix, I'm expecting him to start week 1. He's going to exceed a lot of people's expectations. He is the perfect fit for Sean Payton's offense. The big knock on Bo Nix was that he was a check-down merchant. Well, guess what Drew Brees was? A check-down merchant. Sean Payton wants a quarterback that plays within the structure of his offense. He doesn't want a quarterback that's going to do his own thing, hold on to the ball too long, try to make things happen. He wants somebody that's going to execute the offense at a high level. That's what Bo Nix did at Oregon. And that's why Bo Nix and Sean Payton are perfect marriage for each other. I see him throwing 25 touchdowns, only 7 interceptions because he was really good taking care of the football at Oregon. He has a lot of experience. I expect him to complete 68% of his passes. He's going to throw for 3,752 passing yards. He's also going to be a little bit of a factor in the ground game because he also is an underrated athlete. People seem to forget that when Bo Nix was coming out of high school, he was arguably the best dual threat quarterback of his recruiting class. So he's also going to chip in on the ground game. I see him having a few rushing touchdowns as well. Don't be surprised if Bo Nix ends up being a finalist for Offensive Rookie of the Year this season. This is easily the most underrated and slept on rookie quarterback coming out of this 2024 draft class. It's not always about who's the most talented. As we've seen with Brock Purdy, sometimes it's about going to the right head coach and the right scheme, and that's where Bo Nix went. There wasn't a better fit than Bo Nix with Sean Payton. Sean Payton is going to turn this dude into gold. Y'all can sleep on him all you want to. He's going to be better than Russell Wilson. And I'm willing to merch that. He's going to win more games this season than what Russell Wilson did last year in Denver. Caleb Williams, he's been hyped up to be the messiah of quarterback prospects. He's supposed to be the next Patrick Mahomes, the next Aaron Rodgers. I see him living up to the hype year one. I think he's going to shatter the Chicago Bears' all-time passing yardage record. I can't believe Chicago is one of the NFL's oldest franchises, and they have yet to have a single quarterback in their franchise existence throw for more than 4,000 yards in the season. Caleb Williams, year one, is going to shatter that record. He's going to throw for 4,081 passing yards. He's going to have a touchdown interception ratio of 28-12. The thing with Caleb Williams is that he has to do a better job of taking what the defense gives him. There are times at USC last year when he tried to do way too much. He tried to put that Superman cape on, and it costed him sometimes, especially when USC got blasted and smacked in the mouth against Notre Dame. He had Shane Waldron as his OC. And Shane Waldron was the same offensive coordinator for the last couple of years, I believe, Russell Wilson was in Seattle. Caleb Williams has a little bit of some similarities to Russell Wilson's game in terms of them wanting to improvise, making things happen outside of the pocket. But Caleb Williams is a better pure pocket passer coming out than what Russell Wilson was when he first started his season, or his career, with the Seattle Seahawks. With Caleb Williams being a rookie, there still are going to be a lot of growing pains, but he easily used to have a CJ Stroud, Andrew Luck kind of rookie season. He's going to complete 65.3% of his passes. He's going to be a factor on the ground game. Caleb Williams is a really good runner. He has a running style that's really similar to Jalen Hurts. He's more elusive than Jalen. He doesn't have tons of getaway speed, but he has enough speed that you give him space in the open field, he can take it to the house for 40, 50 yards. But he has really good ball carrier vision, and this dude is built kind of stocky. You know, he's not the smallest guy in the world at quarterback, as some people may think. This dude is actually pretty built. He has a pretty strong upper and lower body. So you see Caleb Williams in the open field, I wouldn't be surprised if he runs a few of these defensive backs over who don't like to get their hands dirty and don't like to tackle. So he's also going to have 5 rushing touchdowns, 432 rushing yards. He's not a run-first quarterback, but Chicago definitely should utilize a little bit of his running ability when it comes to design quarterback runs, read options. That's how Chicago can get the most out of Caleb Williams, because this just isn't a dude who you should be asking to just sit back and drop back pass for 40, 50 times a game, although he can do that. But you also have to utilize a little bit of his athleticism, because he is a really good athlete. A really good one, especially when he gets in the open field. He's really invasive, really elusive. He's going to have one of the best rookie seasons that we've ever seen out of a rookie quarterback. I see him taking Chicago to the playoffs year one, and he should produce the best season that Chicago has ever gotten out of a quarterback. The last time Chicago had some decent quarterback play was Jake Cutler all the way in 2010 when he is pedaling on the bike in the NFC Conference Championship game against the Green Bay Packers. Drake May, I don't see him starting out the gate week one. I do believe that the Patriots are going to honor their word and they're going to roll with Jacoby Brissett for the first couple of weeks. But New England has one of the worst rosters in the National Football League this year. They got a very young offense. Their offensive line doesn't look good. The receiving core isn't that good neither. But they have some young guys that I really like, especially my guy Javon Baker out of UCF. But the reason why I don't feel confident about Drake May being able to have a good rookie year when his number does get called to start is because Alex Van Pelt isn't a good offensive coordinator. The only time he's called plays during his tenure in the league was with the Buffalo Bills in the late 2000s, and they had one of the worst offenses in the league that year. He was their OC. He never called plays with the Cleveland Browns. Kevin Kevin Stefanski did. I don't really have a lot of faith in that Patriots coaching staff. Drake May has all the physical tools to be one of the best quarterbacks in the game, but just mentally and from his footwork, he needs a lot of work. I don't think he's ready to go out there and start at any point this season. And by you throwing him out there, you're basically saying our season's over and we just need to get this young man some reps and some experience so he can have something to build on going into 2025. I think the touchdown interception ratio is going to look really nasty, 9-8. He'll probably complete under 60% of his passes. Now, he is going to have some big time runs on the ground because he is a really good athlete. He has a lot of similarities to Josh Allen. As a matter of fact, when I was watching his film, when he was playing at UNC, I called him Baby Josh Allen because that's exactly who he looks like going into his rookie year. He looks exactly like Josh Allen going into year one coming out of Wyoming for the Buffalo Bills. And we saw that Josh Allen, his rookie season, it was hard to watch at times. I think we can see the same thing happening to Drake May. If New England had a better offensive coordinator, somebody who was more proven, who had a little bit more better respected credentials and rep around the league, I would feel a lot more confident about him succeeding. But I just don't see it with him having a good rookie season. I think if he ends up having to go out there and struggle, it's going to look really ugly. And I see him probably getting the starting nod around midway through the season, around Thanksgiving is probably where we're going to start seeing Drake May get significant action. Jayden Daniels is a huge wild card because he could be really good this season and lead Washington to the postseason. And he also could be a little tough to watch also. His film at LSU was a little bit all over the place. He's a really good deep ball thrower, especially when he's throwing the ball outside of the hashes. Washington does have a pretty good group of wide receivers. You got Terry McLaurin. You got Jahan Dotson, who should have a bounce back year this season. And Jayden Daniels, luckily enough, even though he got drafted by a defensive-minded head coach, you got Cliff Kingsbury, who is a pretty respected offensive mind in the league. And Cliff Kingsbury, with the kind of system and the way that he likes to run his offense, fits perfectly with Jayden Daniels' skill set. Jayden Daniels is still a little bit raw to me as a thrower, but he did get gradually better. The last 2 years he was at LSU, I see his rookie season being pretty solid. 19 touchdowns to 13 interceptions. He'll complete 61% of his passes. I don't see him throwing for a bunch of yards. 3,351 through the air is, I think that's pretty good, above average for a rookie. But where Jayden Daniels is going to make his living is on the ground. 653 rushing yards, 7 rushing touchdowns. I know a lot of Washington fans are going to be saying, JT, that's a little bit too low for the rushing total, don't you think? The thing with Jayden Daniels that irked me during this draft process was how people kept comparing him to Lamar Jackson. Him and Lamar Jackson are not the same damn player. Lamar Jackson barely got touched when he was coming out of Louisville, and he barely gets touched now in the NFL. Meanwhile, Jayden Daniels, every time I watch the LSU game, I'll never forget watching LSU versus Ole Miss live. And early into the game, Jayden Daniels got hit stick, fumbled the football, and Ole Miss scoops it up and takes it to the crib. He does not know how to avoid contact. For the life of me, Jayden Daniels, if you're listening to this right now, learn how to slide, please. Because with the way you're built, like a damn toothpick, you take one big hit from a guy like Quan Alexander or Michael Parsons, and your career may be over. It's going to be DOA as soon as they land their mitts on you, my dude. Like, you got to learn how to get the hell down. So that's why I don't really see him going crazy in the rushing yards department, because he has elusiveness in his game, but he has more so of a herky-jerky running style. If you get what I'm saying, he runs up high. Lamar Jackson, when you see Lamar Jackson run, it's north-south, and he looks like a damn cheetah. Jayden Daniels, he's fast, he's elusive, but I think a little bit of that elusiveness that we saw out of LSU is kind of going to go away a little bit once you get to the NFL if you're Jayden Daniels, just because you're going against guys who have way more experience, who take better angles, who are going to be a lot faster, so they can close the gap and the distance between Jayden Daniels. I'm not saying he's not going to be a great dual threat quarterback and he's not going to have an impact on the ground game, but I don't see him putting up Justin Fields and Lamar Jackson kind of numbers on the ground. That just really isn't, I really don't see it. I would be scared to run Jayden Daniels a lot at the next level just because of how thinly he's built. But I do see him being a pretty solid passer, and he definitely could exceed my expectations. Hell, he could end up winning Rookie of the Year over Caleb Williams. His upside this season is extremely high. The floor is pretty low. I see him having a rookie season that's in between. You know, you have some good moments, you have some flashes in the pan, but you also have a couple of games that make you go, I don't know. You feel me? J.J. McCarthy, regardless of the tickets that the Minnesota Vikings are trying to sell everybody about Sam Darnold having untapped potential, I expect to see J.J. McCarthy at some point this season, and I don't think it's going to be too long until we see his number called. I'm going to be honest with you, I'm not a big fan of this dude. I feel like he was heavily overrated coming out of Michigan, but he did win all of the big games that Michigan played in throughout his time with the Wolverines. He beat Ohio State multiple times, and this dude has a knack for just being able to get the job done and rising to the occasions and big moments, whether it be with his arm or with his legs. He's going to one of the better offensive minds in the league in Kevin O'Connell, and he has probably the second best supporting cast out of all the rookie quarterbacks this year. You think about Caleb Williams and who he's going to be throwing to. Think about J.J. McCarthy. It's pretty hard to be a bust when you're throwing to Jordan Addison, Jay Jettas, and T.J. Hawkinson, and you got Kevin O'Connell on the sidelines dialing up plays for you. I think his rookie season is going to be pretty solid once he gets his number called. He is going to have some mistakes, because I don't think he's the best when it comes to reading defenses and going through his progressions, but he has pretty good mechanics. He throws from a pretty good and sturdy base. He's a really good athlete. He's somebody that doesn't really look to run a lot, but if you call his number on some design quarterback runs, he definitely has a good amount of athleticism where he can do damage on the ground for you. And he's a really tough son of a gun. This is somebody who isn't going to hesitate to put his shoulder down, to get a first down for you, or who's going to put his body on the line to get a touchdown for you, potentially diving over the top. J.J. McCarthy is one of those prospects that I have to see where he landed before I could really have a proper opinion on him. I think Minnesota is going to be in pretty good hands with him being the starting quarterback. I just rather see him week one than to see Sam Darnold out there. We've already seen enough out of Sam Darnold to know what he is at this point. He's a below average starter. He's a stopgap quarterback until a guy like J.J. McCarthy is ready to play. Expect to see J.J. McCarthy early this season once Sam Darnold ends up stinking up the joint. And lastly, I got Spencer Rattler. I expect to see him get some playing time this year because Derek Carr is the definition of fragile luggage, handle with care. It's not about can he stay healthy, it's about when he's going to get injured. Sam Darnold, he probably isn't going to have a lot of leeway to make mistakes. Derek Carr, he has a little bit of leeway, but at the same time, if he ends up not playing that good and he just continues to be a check down machine late in the season when the Saints season is over, if it's over, we definitely could see Spencer Rattler out there. I definitely could see Mickey Loomis telling Dennis Allen, hey, we're not in the playoff chase. Why are we still rolling Derek Carr out there? Let's see what we got in Spencer Rattler. Spencer Rattler was my 5th ranked quarterback coming out of this class. I felt like he was incredibly underrated. He had some character issues that lowered his draft stock, but I had a early 2nd round grade on him. He had some really good tape last season at South Carolina. It was hard to evaluate him properly because their offensive line was absolutely terrible. It's like every time the dude dropped back, he was running for his life back there, but he has a pretty good arm. he has enough athleticism where he can run around and extend some plays, but I still think that he still is pretty raw. If you start him, he's going to have some moments where he looks good, but he's also going to have a couple of interceptions, some turnovers there. I could see him being a little bit of a better version of Drew Lock. And with the New Orleans Saints probably bringing in a new coaching staff, most likely next year, maybe the new head coach comes in there and they say, you know what? I like what I saw out of Spencer Rattler during his rookie season, because 6 touchdowns, the 7 interceptions in 5 games, I don't think is awful. And he does have some nice wide receivers. You got Raheem Shaheed, you got Chris Olave. The offensive line might not be that good, but I think Spencer Rattler, if you throw him out there late in the season, he can make some plays. He'll also have some mistakes out there. So this is it for my 2024 NFL rookie quarterback stat predictions. Let me know what you guys think about them down in the comment section down below. Leave your stats predictions as well. I would love to hear how good you feel these rookie quarterbacks are going to be. Shout out to everybody in the chat. Shout out to my guy K Roan with the $4.99 donation. He says, powerful JT Sports Live. I appreciate that. He also says, I was concerned for Daniel several times last season. He got hit hard. Well said on Lamar Jackson's running style. So spot on. Shout out Don C. JT, love your energy. That even knowing you're a Steelers fan, you have the ability to be totally unbiased. Been with you for 2 years. Keep it coming. I appreciate you, my guy. Shout out Sophisticated Degenerate. Love your vids. So you know Duval, baby. Shout out to everybody in the chat, man. Shout out to everybody that's watching live on YouTube, live on X. Hit that like button. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Turn on post notifications. If you're watching on X, follow, retweet the live stream, and check out the JT Sports Podcast. We're trying to get to 100 5-star reviews. We are trying to crack the top 200 of sports podcasts. We have a long way to go. So if you support the channel, go ahead, give us a 5-star review on Apple and Spotify. All you got to do is type in the JT Sports Podcast on Apple and Spotify, or you can go down to the links down in the description, and there will be the links to the Apple and Spotify versions of the podcast. We'll greatly appreciate it if you go ahead and give us a 5-star review if you enjoy. I got to get a quick sip of water from the gallon. All right, so the NBA Finals comes on at 8:30, and we're making pretty good time right now because we only got a few topics left. We're going to segue to some college football. If you think Nick Saban retiring means the end of the Alabama dynasty, Kalen DeBoer is about to make you look so foolish, because this is nothing but a passing of the torch. This is the equivalent to when the Green Bay Packers went from Brett Favre to Aaron Rodgers. Kalen DeBoer is the second best head coach in college football right now. There's not a single head coach in the country that has done more with less than what Kalen DeBoer has done the 2 seasons he was up there with the Washington Huskies. He went 25-3, led them to a national championship in year 2, and most of those guys he didn't even recruit. So I can definitely see Kalen DeBoer 6 months from now on Monday in early January raising up that national trophy or that national championship trophy for the Crimson Tide, because although they lost a lot of talent to the draft and the transfer portal, they still have the second overall best roster in America according to 24/7 Sports. He also brings in the 3rd ranked portal class. You got Jalen Milroe coming back at quarterback. Him and Jalen Milroe are going to be a deadly combination this year. This is sentiment that Jalen Milroe isn't going to be a good fit in Kalen DeBoer's system, but that's a giant misconception. If you watch Washington's offense last year, a lot of what made Michael Penix so successful at Washington was how well he threw the ball downfield outside of the numbers. He was a really good deep ball thrower. That's the same thing that Jalen Milroe is, a really good deep ball thrower. As a matter of fact, he's probably a better deep ball thrower than he is when it comes to throwing the ball in the short, intermediate areas of the field. And with Kalen DeBoer being able to help Michael Penix improve, I can only imagine he's going to be able to do the same thing for Jalen Milroe. You're going to see Jalen Milroe become a way better all-around and more polished quarterback under Kalen DeBoer's tutelage. He's going to be a way better offensive mind than what he had last year with Tommy Rees, who kind of limited his ceiling to a certain extent. The wide receiver room got hit hard with the losses of Jermaine Burton to the NFL. Isaiah Bond went to Texas, but there still is a lot of talent in that wide receiver room. They got nothing but 5- and 4-star guys down there. You had a few wide receivers who followed Kalen DeBoer from UW down to Tuscaloosa. That receiver room is going to be really fun to watch. They got a lot of speed down there, a lot of dynamic playmakers who are going to make a lot of things happen in the vertical passing game. Their running back position is absolutely insane. My favorite running back that they have is number 26. I can't remember his name, but I was watching Alabama spring game, and I was like, damn, this 26 dude is nice. Really good vision, great contact balance. He reminds me a lot of Bucky Irving from Oregon. Alabama may have one of the most underrated and one of the best running back rooms in the SEC. Everybody's talking about how good the passing game is going to be for Alabama, but Kalen DeBoer, the rushing attack he had at Washington wasn't too shabby, but I can only imagine how good his offense is going to be with him being able to be more well-balanced, throwing the ball and running the football with the same talent he has in the running back room. Plus, you couple that with Jalen Milroe's athleticism and what he brings to your rushing attack, Alabama's offense is going to be really unstoppable this year. Another thing is that the offensive line for the last 3-4 years has been a big Achilles heel for the Crimson Tide. That's not going to happen anymore this season. They should have one of the best offensive lines in college football, at least top 10 at worst. There were at least a couple of offensive linemen or two that followed Kalen DeBoer from Washington to Alabama as well. They were pretty good. You got Caden Proctor back after he oddly transferred to Iowa and then transferred back down to Tuscaloosa. That probably is one of the weirdest transfers of the transfer portal era, but who cares? He's back at Alabama now, so it doesn't matter. The defense. I definitely do expect there to be a drop-off because Nick Saban is one of the greatest head coaches in the history of this sport, but also probably the best defensive mind that college football has ever seen. So it's only right to expect this defense to drop off a little bit, and you lose Dallas Turner, Chris Boswell, Kool-Aid, and Terry Arnold to the NFL. You also lost Caleb Downs to Ohio State via the portal, but there still is talent there, especially on the front seven. Will your front seven be as good as what it was in 2024? Maybe not, but I can still see this defensive line and the linebackers playing at a pretty high level. You got Quandarius Robinson coming back, Jahil Campbell and Deontay Lawson return. You got LT Overton via the portal. Malachi Moore is still there in the secondary. He was one of the better defensive backs in the nation last year. You got a really good cornerback out of USC and Dormani Jackson, who has a lot of untapped potential. I feel like USC didn't really do a good job of maximizing this dude's skill set, but under Kalen DeBoer and their new defensive coordinator, Kane Womack, who is a former Burroughs Award finalist, I feel like we're going to see the best of Dormani Jackson playing for the Crimson Tide. And you got a true freshman that they've been raving about all throughout spring camp, and Xavier Brown, who's expected to start for them this year, according to the multiple depth charts that I looked at for the Tide. He was the third best cornerback from the 2024 recruiting cycle. So overall, from a talent standpoint, everything is there for Kalen DeBoer to win it all year one at Tuscaloosa. And their schedule isn't that difficult. They got to play Georgia at home. But before you play the Bulldogs, you get to play Western Kentucky, USF, Wisconsin on the road. You should be undefeated before you go into that game against Georgia. And I'd like you to win that game. Georgia's kryptonite is Alabama. And I don't see that changing with Nick Saban leaving, because Kalen DeBoer was mopping the floor with Dan Lanning, who was a Kirby Smart disciple. And he also is 10-1 against top 25 teams. If you talk about one of the best head coaches when it comes to big games, it doesn't get any better than Kalen DeBoer. And yeah, of course, Kirby Smart is also really good in these big time games. But you got to remember that Georgia's schedule is really tough this year because you got 3 road games against 3 pretty much the best teams in the SEC, not named Georgia. On the road against Bama, on the road against Texas and Ole Miss. Georgia's going to drop at least 1 or 2 of those games, and it's hard to win at Alabama. Alabama has only lost like a handful of games over the last decade. You got to be a damn good team to beat Alabama on the road, and Georgia definitely is good enough to get the job done, but I would like to see Alabama probably walk away with the W in that game, most likely. Okay, Kalen DeBoer is just that good of a head coach. I don't think that Kirby Smart and Georgia are going to get one up on them when they got to play in Tuscaloosa. And then you got to play Missouri at home. That's probably your second toughest home game of the season. You should be able to win that one. Missouri is insanely overrated. And their next 3 toughest road games after they play Wisconsin early in the year is at Tennessee, at LSU in Death Valley. Then you got to go to Norman to square it down with the Sooners. All 3 of those games should be winnable. Tennessee could be a tough out. They're going to be really good. They're going to have arguably the best defensive line in the nation. LSU probably still isn't going to have a defense this year. And I love Oklahoma. Oklahoma could pull off the upset, but I could see Alabama rolling in that game. The ceiling for Alabama this year under Kalen DeBoer is 12-0 potentially, winning the SEC and winning the national championship. And you're not crazy to believe that if he was able to win with Chris Peterson's guys in 2 seasons at Washington, and remember, he did more in the 2 seasons he was at UW than what Chris Peterson did, spending way more years there. So imagine what he's going to be able to do with the talent that he's inheriting at Alabama from Nick Saban. We seem to forget that Alabama's last couple of recruiting classes have been top 3, top 5 at worst. This is still one of the best, most complete teams, not just in this conference, but in college football. And if Nick Saban never retired, Alabama probably would have been the favorite to win the SEC this year. The favorites over Bama are Georgia and Texas, and we've already seen Kalen DeBoer get the better of Steve Sarkisian. Alabama's schedule is favorable. You're going to have a great offensive line. Jalen Milroe is going to be tremendously improved as an all-around quarterback under Kalen DeBoer. You got a really talented running back room, a lot of depth at wide receiver. I don't see Alabama losing any more than 10 games this year. The possible losses could be to Georgia at home, and they possibly could drop a road game against Tennessee or LSU on the road. But ultimately, Alabama to me is a lock for the playoffs this year. But the upside with this team is natty. And anything less, I would be a little bit disappointed if Kalen DeBoer won less than 10 games this year. That's how good of a head coach this dude is. I get that he has a lot of expectation and a lot of pressure because he's replacing the greatest head coach of this, not even this era, but to ever coach college football. I get that. But pressure doesn't define a head coach. Okay, at the end of the day, you got to go out there and you got to win those games. And Kalen DeBoer in 2 years at Washington went 25-3, 10-1 against top 10 teams and took them to a natty despite having a way less talented roster than what he had to work with going into this season. I expect Alabama to be in a national championship conversation. I expect them to go far in the playoffs, and I wouldn't be surprised to see them win it all this year. Shout out to my guy, Panthers Prime Podcast. What's up, my dude? Go ahead, subscribe to his channel, man. Really good Carolina Panthers content, unbiased, pretty good, really good analysis. And me and him kind of see eye to eye on a lot of things. I still want to know how he feels about what if CJ Stroud was playing for the Carolina Panthers last year, but we'll say that for another day. Okay, so what should we talk about next? Let's talk about this before we get into the SEC power rankings. We're going to wrap up the show with the SEC power rankings. The Houston Texans aren't locks to win the AFC South this year. That may sound like a hot take, but I wouldn't sleep on the Jaguars this year. Before Trevor Lawrence got injured the second half of last season, Jacksonville was 8-1. They were number one when it came to the playoff race for the AFC 1 seed. And then once he got injured, that's when their season started to go left. But with him coming back fully healthy, Jacksonville slightly revamping his supporting cast, you get a better defensive coordinator. Jacksonville most definitely could end up winning the AFC South. And I remember when around this same time last offseason, people thought that Jacksonville was going to be a lock to win this division. And we saw the Houston Texans win it. And the AFC South is probably as competitive as it's ever been in the last couple of years. Because not only do you have the Jaguars who could potentially win this division, but the Tennessee Titans are a huge wild card team. And I don't mean that by them being a playoff wild card team. I mean, they're a wild card team in terms of they could be really good or they could be really terrible, depending on how well Will Levis plays. And I was listening to Ryan Carthon do a recent podcast episode with Bussin' with the Boys. Really love his personality. He understands what he's doing down there. Him and Bill Callahan are on the same page when it comes to their vision for what they want the Tennessee Titans to become. I wouldn't be surprised if we saw Tennessee go from worst to first in this division because they have the talent to do so. You got DeAndre Hopkins already. You now pair him up with Tyler Boyd and Calvin Ridley. And then you got Chiggy Okonkwo at tight end, who's really underrated. Your running back room is pretty solid. Your offensive line still is a huge question mark. And it's not more so your whole entire offensive line. Really, your left side is cemented. You got J.C. Latham at left tackle. You got Peter Skoronski at left guard. But the whole entire right side is a mystery. But you hired Bill Callahan, who is one of the greatest offensive line coaches in the history of football. So if there's anybody who can fix Tennessee's offensive line woes, it's him. The defense could be pretty good also. They got a lot of talent in the secondary. They got a lot of depth there. The pass rush kind of concerns me a little bit, and their depth and talent at linebacker too. But overall, if Tennessee ends up playing at their best level this year, and Will Levis ends up truly being the answer for them as their long-time quarterback, they definitely could win this division. Are they as talented as the Houston Texans? I believe they are. You just think about the addition of Joe Mixon and Stephon Diggs and just thinks that makes the Houston Texans an automatic lock to win this division. But I don't think the gap between the Texans and the Titans, if everything goes right for Will Levis, is too far off neither. The Indianapolis Colts, they could be a really interesting team to watch with the healthy Anthony Richardson. They went 9-8 with Gardner Minshew at quarterback. Shane Steichen is one of the best offensive minds in the game. We saw how good the Philadelphia Eagles were when he was their offensive coordinator. Jalen Hurts had an MVP caliber season, led them to the Super Bowl, and then last year he dropped off in a major way once Shane Steichen left for Indianapolis. So that just shows you how good of an offensive mind Shane Steichen is. As long as Anthony Richardson can stay healthy, Indianapolis could be a pretty good team. And this could be the best division in the NFL when it comes to quarterback play. There are a lot of quarterbacks in this division that have the upside to be top 10. CJ Stroud, we already know that he's the chosen one. He's been anointed already as a top 6, top 7 quarterback in the league. But if Will Levis ends up playing up to his potential, he could also be a top 10 quarterback. Trevor Lawrence, we've already seen when he's at his best, he's a top 10 quarterback as long as he can maintain a consistent level of play. And Anthony Richardson, there's a lot of hype around him potentially winning MVP. If he plays up to an MVP level, hell, he could be as good as CJ Stroud. And him and CJ Stroud were having two of the best rookie seasons until AR went down with that shoulder injury. So there's a lot of great quarterback play in this division. There are a lot of teams that have the upside to be really good, just as good as the Houston Texans. I wouldn't sleep on any other team in this division. You know, I still would pick Houston to win the AFC South, but I wouldn't call them a lock. You know, these were the same people who tried to tell you that Jacksonville was a lock. We're too quick to anoint teams after one good season. Yes, we know that CJ Stroud isn't going anywhere at quarterback. I'm not saying that the Houston Texans aren't locks because he's going to have a sophomore slump. I'm saying that they're not a guarantee to win the South just because there are other teams in this division that have the capability to be just as good as what Houston could be this season. Hell, Tennessee could make a deep playoff run. They win this division. That tells you that Will Levis played really well. And hell, with how good their offensive line could be under Bill Callahan, I could see them being a scary team. If you see them in the playoffs with all the talent they got at wide out, a good offensive line, they could come out of nowhere and shock some people. Same thing with Indianapolis. Anthony Richardson is 255 now, running 4.43. Do you not know how scary that shit is in the open field? There are not a lot of defensive backs that are going to want to tackle Anthony Richardson one-on-one. There are too many DBs that I've seen make some business decisions already when it came to having the capability to get Anthony Richardson down, but they just said, you know what, no thanks, I'd rather just try to ankle tackle him. Trevor Lawrence has already won a playoff game. He's already won this division once. And before he went down, I'm going to say it one last time, Jacksonville had the 1 seed in the AFC. So it definitely is possible for them to take this division from Houston. I truthfully believe that the AFC South this year comes down to Houston and Jacksonville. I probably still would take Houston, but I'm still not counting out the Jaguars. I see them as a 10, 11-win team this year. The Texans have a higher ceiling than Jacksonville, but the Texans' offensive line still is a giant concern. I don't think they really did too much in free agency to improve that, and that could be their Achilles heel. So I'm not going to just anoint the Texans as a sure thing to win this division. Deion Sanders, the future around... Start that over. There's been a lot of speculation around Deion Sanders' future at Colorado. Is he going to stay once his sons end up leaving for the NFL next year? Or is he going to end up leaving for a better job? There's a good amount of people out there that think he could end up becoming the next head coach of the Dallas Cowboys in 2025, replacing Mike McCarthy. Even though Deion has already said several times he has no interest coaching at the NFL level, there are still people that think that if he gets the offer from America's team with him having a good relationship with Jerry Jones, he wouldn't pass up the job and the money. Here's why I don't see Deion Sanders leaving Colorado for Dallas. First of all, Jerry Jones is an egomaniac, and he's a control freak. Unless Deion Sanders is just going to be on his knees with some knee pads, sucking up to Jerry Jones and listening to his every command, which I doubt he will and ever would, I wouldn't see him taking that job. If Deion Sanders is going to coach the Dallas Cowboys, Jerry Jones is going to have to move the hell out the way and let Deion coach the team. One thing about Jerry Jones that everybody knows is that this dude is always heavily involved. He always has his fingers around things. And until he ends up just completely moving away from the franchise and letting his sons run it, I don't really see that changing. Unless Deion Sanders can come on here or come out there and lay down some ground rules and say, no, Jerry, this is my team. I'm going to coach it the way that I want to coach it. Him and Jerry Jones and Jimmy Johnson fell out, despite the fact that Jimmy Johnson was winning championships over ego. So you really think that Jerry Jones is going to put his ego aside for Deion Sanders? I don't think Deion Sanders has any interest coaching the Dallas Cowboys. Even if his son ends up getting drafted by Dallas to replace Dak Prescott, I still don't see it happening. Yes, Deion Sanders has coached Shedeur Sanders at every level that he's played football at, but I see college football being the end of the road for the Sanders quarterback tandem, quarterback head coach duo, because Jerry Jones just is really hard to work with. Bill Belichick, I could see him having a hard time wanting to take this job, knowing how big of a control freak he is. He was the general manager and the head coach of the New England Patriots. You really think that he's going to want to have to suck up to Jerry Jones? And Bill Belichick is the last head coach that I would ever picture being a Jerry Jones groupie or Jerry Jones just control puppet like Mike McCarthy is. Like, Jerry Jones talks way too much. When you're coaching the Dallas Cowboys, not only do you have to deal with the distraction of just being America's team, but your own owner, the dude who cuts your checks for you, is a distraction because he's doing press runs, he's doing interviews with the media. Jerry Jones is just way too involved for Deion to take this job. And even though Deion Sanders has said it countless times that he has no interest coaching at the NFL level, there still is people throwing this theory out that he's going to end up coaching Dallas in 2025. I do not see that happening. And how do you guys even know if Colorado is even going to be good enough this year for him to get better job opportunities? Now, I believe Colorado could win the Big 12 championship, but I do know that that is a really bold prediction. And realistically, Colorado most likely could be anywhere between 8 to 9 wins. But 10 is definitely the ceiling. And the upside is them making it to the playoffs after capturing the Big 12 title. But if he captures the Big 12 title and he was to leave Colorado, I don't see Dallas being on the table for him. Lincoln Riley has turned down Jerry Jones in the past. Deion Sanders wouldn't have a problem doing the same thing. If Deion Sanders had the opportunity to coach the Pittsburgh Steelers, let's say if they never extended Mike Tomlin, I could see him maybe considering that offer, because with Pittsburgh, you would have gotten a lot of stability. Hell, if the Philadelphia Eagles job came open and they offered it to him, I could potentially see him taking that job. But I don't see him leaving Colorado to go coach Dallas, despite how close him and Jerry Jones are. I think he views Jerry Jones as a friend, a very close friend, as somebody who used to play under for and somebody who used to cut his checks, but I don't think it's anything more than that. Why would Deion Sanders, somebody who has one of the biggest egos in sports history, want to coach under a guy in Jerry Jones who has the biggest ego ever for an owner? I think he would tell Jerry, I love you, but no thank you. Still going to be there for your summertime yacht parties, though. All right, before we get into our last segment, our SEC power rankings, shout out to everybody in the chat. Shout out to my guy, Kate Rome, my guy, Sophisticated Degenerate. Shout out to everybody listening live on X, YouTube, wherever you're listening. Hit the like button. Retweet, share the live stream, subscribe to the channel. Remember, you can follow us on Instagram at JTSports_, at X, at JTSports__. Also, remember that we're not just a YouTube channel. We are a podcast. You can find this episode and all of our previous ones in audio format on Apple, Spotify, Amazon, wherever you get your podcast from. The JT Sports Podcast is available. All right. The SEC is wide open this year. There are no favorites in this conference this year. And I'm here to give you guys my 2024 SEC preseason power rankings. Where are Texas and Oklahoma going to rank entering their first year of SEC play? Where's Alabama going to rank year one under Kalen DeBoer? I got the answers for you. First, we're going to start off with, you guys know who's going to be number one, man. Vanderbilt. I love Clark Lee, but it just isn't working out with him at Vandy. Anytime they get some good players that produce at a high level, they always end up transferring out to greener pastures. This is the toughest job in college football. You don't have a lot of resources. The school is more committed to academics than they are to football excellence, despite playing in the toughest conference in college football, where the majority of these programs emphasize football and prioritize it over everything. Vanderbilt, they got a lot of questions. You don't know how good your offensive line is going to be. You're lacking talent at wide receiver. We don't know how good you're going to be defensively. It's just, Vandy's not going to be a good team this year. They come in at 16. Mississippi State, I got them at 15th. I think they are the second worst team in the SEC. They have Jeff Lebby as their new head coach who comes from Oklahoma, previously being their offensive coordinator. He overhauled this team through the transfer portal. They got a lot of transfers who are expected to be starting for them this year. Some of them they got in the early transfer portal cycle. Some they got in the later spring portal window. You got Blake Shapen as your expected starting quarterback this year. And this offense could be a little bit dynamic because they do have a little bit of talent at wide receiver. So if Blake Shapen plays well, offensively, they could be a little tough to stop. Their offensive line, though, most of their starters are going to be coming from the transfer portal, and it's really hard to have a good offensive line when you have guys who don't have a lot of chemistry or experience playing with each other. An offensive line, like we saw with Colorado last year, isn't one of those things where you can just assemble a bunch of guys from the portal and put them on the field and it works. It takes timing, it takes chemistry, and a lot of experience to get high-level offensive line play. They got a few guys on their front seven on defense that are really good, but their secondary doesn't look too good. As a matter of fact, their secondary probably is the second worst in the SEC, slightly above Vanderbilt. It's going to be tough sledding for Mississippi State. Jeff Lebby's first season in Starksville, they come in at 15. Arkansas, I have them at number 14. Sam Pittman has the hottest seat in America. Outside of Billy Napier, it doesn't get any hotter than the chair that Sam Pittman's sitting on right now in Fayetteville, Arkansas. You know things are looking dim for you when you decided to hire Bobby Petrino, bring him back to Arkansas and make him your offensive coordinator. Then you lost two of your best players on your team last year in KJ Jefferson to UCF and Rocket Sanders to South Carolina via the portal. And you replaced KJ Jefferson with Trenton Green, who comes from Boise State. And I've seen a good amount of him at Boise State because I love watching Mountain West football because they play so late. He's a massive downgrade from KJ Jefferson. You know, he's not the most natural quarterback. When you just watch him throw the football, his mechanics look a little off. And Bud Petrino definitely is a pretty good offensive mind, but I don't think Trent Green's going to be that good. To be a decent quarterback in the SEC, you got to be a serviceable passer. And I don't think you're going to get serviceable quarterback play out of Trent Green, at least when it comes to him throwing the football. On the ground, he could be pretty dynamic. He does have really good size. He's a really good athlete. Arkansas is severely lacking talent at wide receiver. The offensive line should be improved this year. Their defense was pretty good last year, but they could have a drop-off this year because they lose a few guys to the draft. It just is a complete mess down there in Fayetteville, Arkansas for Sam Pittman, and he possibly is going to be one of the first coaches to lose their job this season. Florida comes in at number 13 for me. You can make the argument that Florida should be a lot higher. They bring in a top 5 transfer portal class. You got some pretty good finds via the portal. You got Joyce Slackman from Penn. You also got Elijah Badger from Arizona State. You pair him up with Eugene Wilson. You're going to have one of the better receiver rooms in the SEC. Graham Mertz was really solid last year. Your offensive line could be decent. But it's just, I don't have a lot of faith in Billy Napier. He's still calling the plays, which has been the biggest criticism that Gator fans have had of Billy Napier. His play calling is too conservative. It's not really that innovative. His late game decision making and clock management is really questionable. I just don't see it with Florida this year with Billy Napier. I see them in the market for another head coach at the end of this season. I don't care how good he's recruiting. When you're at a school like Florida, it's not hard for you to recruit at a high level. Even Dan Mullen was bringing in pretty decent recruiting classes, and the recruiting classes that Billy Napier has brought in compared to Dan Mullen, there's not really a big difference. They're around the same range. It's just that a lot of Dan Mullen's guys weren't sticking with the program. But with Billy Napier's guys, how many of these dudes are developing and becoming high-level players for Florida? You know, you got to ask yourself that. So Florida, I have them at number 13. At number 12, we got South Carolina. The Beamer boys are coming off the worst season under Shane Beamer. They were a complete shit show on offense. They had no offensive line help for Spencer Rattler. Anytime he dropped back to throw, he was running for his life back there. Your wide receiving core wasn't that deep. And even this season, your wide receiving core still isn't that deep. But you do have one guy that I'm really intrigued in. That's Nick Harbor, who is going viral on social media because he potentially could be participating in the Summer Olympics. This dude has insane size. He's like 240-something pounds. He's built like DK Metcalf, and they say he could be faster than Tyreek Hill, which is absolutely scary. You got Lenore Sellers, who is another athletic freak. He's like 240-something pounds at 6'3", 6'4", playing quarterback. He has a gigantic arm. You talk about Joe Milton's arm strength. Lenore Sellers says, hold my beer. Really good touch on his deep ball. And South Carolina is bringing in one of the best defenses that they've had in the last couple of years. And this is easily the most talented defense that Shane Beamer has had in his couple of years with that program. That coaching staff, they feel really good about what they have on that defensive line and at linebacker. Not only do they feel good about their starters at those positions, but they also feel insanely confident about the depth that they have behind those guys. And your secondary should be pretty decent too. South Carolina is a sleeper team, a true sleeper team, and the most stacked conference in the SEC. There aren't too many sleeper teams in this conference this year, but if there was a team that could surprise some people and randomly just win 8-9 games, it definitely is South Carolina. I believe in Lenore Sellers. I think that offensive line can finally play at a serviceable level for the first time ever under Shane Beamer. South Carolina, don't sleep on the Beamer boys in 2024 because they definitely can surprise some people. Auburn comes in at number 11. I wanted to put them higher. I don't have them this low because I think they're bad. I have them this low because there's not a big difference between this year's Auburn team versus last year's Auburn team. The ceiling for Auburn last year was 7-8 wins. The ceiling for Auburn this year is probably 7 wins max. They got a mix of experience, but also a lot of young talent that they're going to be relying on. They got a true freshman wide receiver in Cam Coleman, who they're expecting to come in and be dominant as their number one wideout right away. You got Peyton Thorne coming back at quarterback. It's just, Auburn isn't a bad team. It's just, they're a solid team in a stacked conference. So how higher, if you're an Auburn fan that's upset and you're throwing your middle finger at me through the screen, how higher would you put Auburn at? Would you put them over any other team that I have above you? I really don't know. It's like you, under Hugh Freeze, are definitely one of those teams that you just can't judge strictly based on talent. But at the same time, when you're playing in the toughest conference in America, relying on a couple of true freshmen and, a few experienced guys is going to get you far. I just think that Auburn is a year or two away from being a legitimate contender in the SEC. I can see them winning 6 games, but, we saw Auburn win 6 games last year. I really don't see too much changing between Auburn from 2024 from last year. Number 10, I got Kentucky. Kentucky is a team that you talk about somebody who could surprise some people who we could see in Atlanta this year when nobody expects it. Kentucky's one of those teams. They got a really good defensive line, one of the best defensive lines in college football. A lot of production, a lot of experience on that unit. They're going to have a pretty good secondary. This is the most talented Kentucky team that they've had in recent memory. If you just talk about Kentucky from a pure talent standpoint, a lot of these dudes they recruited aren't your typical 3-star, 2-star guys that you think of when it comes to Kentucky football. Like, they got a lot of blue chippers on that squad this year, especially on offense. I love their wide receiving core. That's why I bought into the hype with the dude they had last year in Devin Leary. I thought that Kentucky was going to win 9 games last year because Berrien Brown, Dane Key, I think are 2 of the most criminally underrated wide receivers in the SEC. And that's why I thought Kentucky could have exploded last year, but they were held back by disappointing quarterback play. Because I don't think anybody expected Devin Leary to play like that. You got Brock Vandagriff there at QB, who you got via the portal from Georgia. If he ends up being as good as expected, with how good that offensive line is, with how good these receivers are, and how good this defense could be, watch out for Big Blue in 2024. I'm trying to tell y'all guys, like, you talk about a team that could make it to Atlanta out of nowhere. Kentucky definitely has that kind of squad. And Kentucky is one of those teams that they're due for a 10-win season every 4 years. And it's been a while since they had their last 10-win season. With the squad they have this year, this could be one of those years that Kentucky just blows up. At number 9, we got Missouri. I know you guys finna say, JT, you tripping? You sleeping on Missouri like this? Yes, I am. You gotta show me this year. Missouri had a fantastic season last year, not taking anything away from them. But the SEC in 2024 is way more competitive than what it was in 2023. Okay, they lost their defensive coordinator, Blake Baker, to LSU, one of the best defensive coordinators in the nation. They also lose a good amount of talent on defense as well. Now, they've brought in some pretty suitable replacements from the portal, and they do pretty much bring back everybody except the Cody Schrader at running back. They got Luther Burden, the best receiver in college football. You got a pretty good offensive line. I just see Missouri coming back a little bit down to earth. I'm not saying they're going to be terrible. They're going to be average. I see them being a 9-win team. But I just can't see them making it to the SEC championship. I don't care how easy their schedule is. They're due for at least 2-3 losses. There were a couple of games that they should have lost last year that they were able to sneak by. If my memory serves me correctly, didn't they barely escape beating Florida last year? And Brady Cook is not that good. He easily, to me, is the second most overrated quarterback in America, right behind DJ Uiagalelei. I'm sorry. Eli Drinkwitz proved me wrong last year. He got to prove me wrong again. If you're a Missouri fan and you want to call me a hater, just go ahead. But I just got to see it again for me to believe the hype. I think that too many people are living in a recency bias when it comes to y'all. And Tennessee and Oklahoma, there are so many teams that are better than you from a talent standpoint and could be better than you this season. Texas A&M, you got Mike Elko. You talk about somebody who did more with less. When Duke beat Clemson last year, that was one of the biggest surprises of the college football season last year. And not just did they beat Duke or beat Clemson, but they manhandled Clemson. They blew those boys out. You would have thought that Duke was a former national championship winner and not Clemson with the way that game panned out. Now, injuries derailed the season, but for them to get Mike Elko was a huge pickup because Mike Elko is one of the better coaches in college football. Is he in that Kalen DeBoer category? Definitely not, but he's a top 25 coach, and he's inheriting a really talented team. They did lose a few guys from the portal, but they brought in a top 5 portal class, I believe. I believe their portal class was 4th or 5th. I don't got the numbers in front of me right now, but they got a really good team this year. You got Connor Wigman coming back at quarterback. He got his season cut short last year. That was one of the main catalysts for the Aggie season being a disaster in 2023. I feel really good about Texas A&M this season. They could be a team that potentially could make it to the playoffs, and there are a lot of Texas A&M fans that would tell you this could be a top 5 defense this year. So Texas A&M comes in at number 8, and all these teams from 10 and up are good enough to make it to the playoffs. That's how deep the SEC is. There are 10 teams that are playoff caliber, even Kentucky. LSU comes in at number 7. Is LSU too low? I'm going to disagree with anybody that feels otherwise. If you feel LSU should be higher, you're basically telling me their defense is going to be tremendously improved from how they played last year. Last year was the worst defense in LSU program history. They bring in an entirely new coaching staff. They got now one of the best defensive coaching staffs in America. Blake Baker calling your defense. You got Bo Davis as your defensive lines coach. But that coaching it's really going to have to pay dividends year one for LSU on that defensive staff because they didn't really get a lot of help in the portal. And Brian Kelly hasn't really been that good when it comes to utilizing the portal because he brought in a big portal class last year. And I don't think too many of those guys panned out because they're still at the well trying to figure it out. Do they have talent on that side? Yes, but just because you got a lot of blue chip 5 and 4 star guys doesn't mean all these guys can play at a high level, because if that was the case, your defense wouldn't have been as bad as what it was last year. LSU fans are going to tell you, man, we bring back so much production on that side. Yes, you do, but this is the same production that contributed to the worst defense you've ever had. So is this good production that you're bringing back, or are these guys that you bring back that still can't play at a high level? Coaching can only fix up so many issues, and that defense will improve, but I still think it's going to be tough sledding for LSU this year. I think they're going to be all offense and no defense this year. Although their defense won't be historically bad, I still think having a 70, 80th ranked defense, we got your wide receiver core got devastated with injuries. Bro McCoy got injured. You had Deontay Thornton, the transfer you got last year from Oregon. I believe he got banged up as well. This year, your receiving core comes back fully intact. And also, you get a lot deeper. You got a really good transfer from Tulane, who was going off in the spring game. You returned 3 out of 5 starters on the offensive line. You also got one of the best offensive tackles from the portal who came from LSU. I think his name is Lance Hurd. Don't quote me on that. Don't get mad at me for not knowing all these guys' names. Like, do you guys not know how many people are coming in and out of the transfer portal? Like, you can take all the notes in the world all you want to, but you try keeping up with all these 400 and 500 guys transferring teams going in and out of the portal and think that you ain't going to miss up on a couple of names here and there. But their defense is really underrated. And what's crazy about Tennessee is how people view them as a finesse team. When you think of Tennessee, you think of a team that just wants to throw it all over the field against you. But last season, they were easily one of the 3 most physical teams in this conference. And it's evident because this year, they got arguably the best defensive line in the nation, with one of their best players on their defensive line currently being expected to be the number 1 overall pick in the 2025 NFL draft. You're going to be good on the offensive and defensive line. Your secondary, it may not be that good, but if you got a defensive line that can get after the quarterback, it helps out a questionable secondary because those guys aren't going to be in coverage for that long. And I love Josh Heupel. I was never a big fan when they made the decision to hire him because they had got the AD from UCF, and he brought in Josh Heupel from UCF, and I didn't really see it with Josh Heupel, but this dude has proven me wrong. And ever since that 2022 season, I low-key have found myself rooting for the Tennessee Vols. And I may just be a tad bit biased because Tennessee has given me some of my best memories as a college football fan, just thinking of the nostalgia. And I just was a big fan of Joshua Dobbs and Hendon Hooker. I still will never get over how that 2022 season ended. Y'all got to get revenge for that 2022 season. I believe you get it this year. You can definitely be a playoff team, and you definitely have way than a better chance of being able to make it to the SEC title game this season. You got Nico Imaviava coming in, replacing Joe Milton at quarterback, highly sought after guy from the recruiting class that Arch Manning was in. Did you know they brought Nico Imaviava in on the official visit on a private jet? You got to be official if you getting flown out on a recruiting visit on a private jet. And he looked really good against Iowa. And I'm not trying to say he's the next Trevor Lawrence, but when I watch him play, he definitely does have a lot of similarities to his skill set. You know, he's long, tall, and lanky. Kind of has a similar running style to Trevor Lawrence, but way more athletic, way more physical. He's beefed up in the weight room. I can't wait to watch Nico Imaviava play this year. And I'm not just saying that because I think I finally learned how to pronounce his name, but this dude is a dark horse Heisman contender. And Tennessee is a dark horse national championship contender. You're going to be good on the O-line. You're going to have arguably the best D-line in America. That's a perfect recipe for a championship team right there. Now we get into the top 5. And boy, I know a lot of y'all not about to agree with me on this one, but the Oklahoma Sooners, man, this is the most underrated team, not just in the SEC, but in all of college football going into this year, man. Like, there are so many of you guys who are sleeping on Oklahoma. They have one of the best defenses in the nation coming into this year. They return a lot of production, and I don't think a lot of you guys know just how truly deep Oklahoma is on that defensive end. Their secondary is like 2-3 guys deep. They were fantastic when it came to forcing turnovers. They also have really good corners. The Achilles heel with Oklahoma under Brent Venables, his first couple of years down there in Norman, has been their defensive line play. They haven't really been that good against the run, and they haven't been able to get consistent pressure on the quarterback. A lot of that's going to change. They got a really good transfer from the MAC. You also got Dominic Williams, the defensive tackle that LSU wanted out of TCU. Oklahoma ended up outbidding them for his services. Brian Kelly was really upset about it. Oklahoma's defense is going to legitimately be a top 3 defense in this conference. Arguably, it could be the best. And they're going to have one of the best defenses in America. This is going to be the first year we truly see that Brent Venables' aggressive physical defense that we were so accustomed to seeing when he was the defensive coordinator for all those years under Dabo Swinney at Clemson. The only thing that could keep Oklahoma from making it to the SEC championship is their new offensive coordinator who's going to be replacing Jeff Labby. And Jackson Arnold disappoints. Jackson Arnold was highly sought after. He had an up and down debut against Arizona in their bowl game. He struggled in the first quarter. Then in the second and third quarter, he was absolutely on fire. He was making big plays with his legs. He was getting outside the pocket. He threw a nice pass in the back of the end zone in the red zone. Oklahoma has a really good group of wide receivers. They got a running back that I really love who has a fun name to pronounce, Gavin Sawchuk. And this Gavin Sawchuk dude, he was going crazy the last month of last regular season, man. I mean, you talk about somebody who was on an absolute tear. Do your homework on Gavin Sawchuk. Like, Oklahoma has some damn talent on this year's team. The only thing that could derail Oklahoma this year is just Jackson Arnold not living up to expectations. Now, the offensive line also is a little bit of a question too, but I definitely expect for that to be fixed this year. With the talent they got at wide receiver, at running back, and them having an elite defense going against this season, Oklahoma has the perfect recipe to be a shocking team that could make it to Atlanta. At number 4, I got Ole Miss. We know Ole Miss has a great offense. All right, they return Jackson Dart. You got a lot of talent on the wide receiver position. Well, you got a lot of talent at the wide receiver position. You lost Quinshawn Judkins, but useless wasn't too bad. You also got another running back that you stole from Colorado or you flipped from the portal. Your offensive line is going to be really good. The question is, are you going to have a damn defense this year? Pete Golding isn't a good defensive coordinator, but they did go really heavy in the portal on trying to overhaul the defense side of the football. They got a lot of guys from the portal on defense that were top 100 rated players or better. So when you think about Ole Miss this season, you could see this being a complete all-around team. And they're a hot dark horse pick to win this conference outside of Georgia and Texas. A lot of people could see Ole Miss winning this conference this year, considering how favorable the schedule is and how stacked they are. This Ole Miss team is exactly similar to last year's FSU's team. They don't recruit at the highest level, but they recruit at a good enough level where not Lincoln Riley, but Lane Kiffin has done a good job of mixing the recruiting in with utilizing the transfer portal and developing some of those transfer portal guys as well. Ole Miss could truly be not just a potential team that wins the SEC this year, but they could win it all this season. Texas comes in at number 3. I'm not low on Steve Sarkisian. I do think that he is a really good head coach. As a matter of fact, he's one of my favorite head coaches in college football. Texas is getting a step up in competition. You know, they're going to have some pretty tough games. You got to play Georgia at home. But I do think that at worst, they'll be a 9-win team. I think their ceiling is 11, 12 wins potentially because, I mean, they got deep pockets down there in Austin. So they can pretty much buy anybody they need from the portal to fix any position that they have holes at. You got Isaiah Bond from Alabama, who was their most productive wide receiver outside of Jermaine Burton. You're going to have a really good offensive line. Quinn Ewers is coming back for his final season. This should be the best of Quinn Ewers that we've seen his last couple of years down there. Your defense, how's that secondary going to look? And how are you going to look on the interior of your defensive line replacing 2 NFL studs or 2 guys that are going to end up being studs at the next level, and Tavondre Sweat and Byron Murphy? So Texas, I think they're the 3rd best team in the SEC going into this year. At number 2, I got the Tide. Man, I might as well become an Alabama fan at this point because I talk about them so much. Only because Kalen DeBoer is my favorite coach in college football. I've been watching this dude ever since Pac-12 After Dark, his first year at Washington. I love this dude. He's a winner. He's won everywhere he's been. He was winning national championships for his alma mater at NAIA and Sioux Falls. He turned around Washington and only 2 years took them to a national championship. Did more with Chris Peterson's squad than what Chris Peterson did with that team that he recruited. Imagine what Kalen DeBoer could do year 1 at Alabama with the kind of talent that the Tide have. And Alabama, we seem to forget that even though they did lose a good amount to the portal and to the NFL, they've recruited at a top 3, top 5 level the last couple of years under Nick Saban. And a lot of those guys are still there. It's not like the whole entire roster end up leaving and going for greener pastures. And Kalen DeBoer, to me, is the 2nd best head coach in college football. I think he's Nick Saban reincarnated. That may be a bold take. I know a lot of people are going to say, whoa. Slow your brakes, JT. You show me another head coach that has done more with less than what Kalen DeBoer has done. And at number 1, I got the Dogs. Listen, man, Kirby Smart, he's not my 2nd favorite head coach in college football. I listen to his epic national championship pregame speech every single day when I wake up. You know, it gets me fired up. It gets me going. Georgia has a lot of talent coming back on both offense and defense. You got Carson Beck, debatably the best quarterback in college football, depending on who you ask. You always know that they're going to be really good on the offensive line. Their defensive line play should be pretty good as well, even though they may not be as good at that position as what they've been in years past. This is the favorite to win the SEC this year. They're the odds-on favorite to win it all this year, and they got to go on the road to play Alabama, Texas, and Ole Miss. All 3 of these teams I have in my top 4 who are ranked behind Georgia. And it's just hard to see them going undefeated this year. I at least could see them having 1 or 2 losses, but they still can end up winning the Natty just because the college football playoffs expanding to 12 teams is going to make it a lot easier for Georgia to overcome those losses and still be able to get to that championship game. So this is my 2024 SEC preseason power rankings. Every SEC team ranked from worst to best. Leave your thoughts in the comment section down below. Who's too low? Who's too high? Who did I get right? And this is it for this episode of the JT Sports Podcast. I appreciate you guys for tuning in. If you enjoyed, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, turn on post notifications so you don't miss when we drop new content and when we go live. If you're listening on X, I apologize for having the X chat turned off. My bad. I was live streaming, or I was doing a practice live stream test last night, and I had to turn it off because I didn't think nobody was going to join. So next time when you guys tune in, that thing is definitely going to be turned on. And I appreciate everybody from X that's tuned in. We're going to be going live on X every day from this point on. And if you're listening on X, follow, rate the podcast 5 stars. You can find us on Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcast from. The JT Sports Podcast is available. Follow us on our social media platforms. You can find us on Instagram at JT Sports _ and on X at JT Sports __. I probably will see you guys Wednesday with another episode. You guys enjoy the NBA Finals. I'm rooting for Dallas Mavericks comeback. Hopefully it happens. Appreciate everybody that's donated to the live stream, everybody that's